good afternoon, or good morning, depending on where you are around the country. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alan Ewing, the Executive Director of CPRS Alliance. Today, we're going to be doing an overview of the OnGo Certification Program. As you see here, only two presenters today. We're going to focus in on the topic and really get after the certification program. So it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Jörg Brakensiek, who is our Test and Certification Program Manager, be taking us through all of the information today. Also, I want to make everyone aware there is a questions tab in your OnGo webinar control panel. If you do have a question during the webinar, please type it in there. What we will do is curate the questions. If we have time toward the end, we will answer the questions. Jörg, and if it's bordering on our marketing side, we'll have some help there, I think, as well. Regardless, all the questions that are entered, we will at least answer via text and include that in the information that is posted after the webinar concludes. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jörg with thanks, and take it away, please, sir.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Really honored to give you an update and an introduction of how the OnGo certification process goes along. So this is a short outline of my presentation. It will take hopefully about 35 minutes, and so then we have about 10 minutes for question and answers at the end. So we try to start covering some basics on the scope of the process, then actually going into more details of what is the testing about and how the process steps are, give you some numbers on how we do from an OnGo perspective, and give you some outline of the roadmap which is coming in the future. But let's get started with the process with the basics. Just to set some terminology straight. So you will hear a lot of what WinForum or CBS Alliance, and I would like to clarify a bit what is doing one side and what the other side is doing. So WinForum is an official FDO with multiple committees. The most important one from our perspective is the Spectrum Sharing Committee, which handles the FCC Part 96 rules for operation in the CBS band. And that group is closely working with the US government to actually allow operation in that band. WinForum is technology neutral, so it can be LTE, can be other technologies, and they develop specification requirements for the certain components of the system, and they also develop tools and which we also use as part of our testing purposes. On the other side, we are the CBS Alliance, and we are particularly focusing and only focusing on LTE and our technologies in the CBS band. And we build on top of the WinForum standards. So we basically are layered on top of WinForum. And we particularly look at the different network use cases like private network, neutral host, multi-service operator network, etc. And our specific focus really on the coexistence of LTE and NR radios. We also have dedicated groups looking on commercialization aspects, business aspects, and marketing issues. And as you can expect, we have a broad range of members. I think at the moment we're standing at above 160 members from all the different aspects of our ecosystem. As I mentioned, we have LTE. We are focusing on LTE and new radio technology. New radio is available starting with release 3. This also is playing around in the ecosystem side. If you look at who are the different players in the CBS Alliance when it comes to certification, on the left side, you see the sort of layered stack, what I mentioned. So on the bottom left, we have the FCC. They are setting the Part 96 rules. They are providing FCC identifiers. And then on top of that, we have the WinForum, which are developing test plans based on those Part 96 rules. They have developed the basic test harness, and they're authorized by the FCC to actually do this work. On top, there is the CBS Alliance. We own the OnGo certification mark. The Alliance is developing and defining the end-to-end certification program management system, a tool, and the processes around this. And this is basically will be my main focus in today's presentation, is really focus on all the different aspects of what CBS Alliance is doing. On the right side, you basically see then the operational aspect. So you have a vendor developing a CBSD or CBSD domain proxy. There is going to select an ATL. The ATL will conduct the testing, providing a test report, will be analyzed then from the Alliance side. And we have the CTA, which are serving as an administrator of our database. But let's get started with the scope. So what actually is it what we certify? The first piece of equipment we certify is a CBSD. A CBSD is a Citizens Broadband Radio Service Device. So you can basically see that as a base station. It's connected to a SAS, a Spectrum Access System, and the evolved packet core, so the network itself. The CBSD is connected to multiple end-user devices, and from a CBS Alliance perspective, this will be LTE or NR in band 48. Band 48 is 3550 megahertz up to 3700 megahertz. So the first component, what we will certify, is a standalone CBSD. We also allow multiple CBSD to bundle together under a domain proxy, and we certify those pairs as well. So meaning we certify a domain proxy CBSD pair. We don't certify individual domain proxies itself. So what are the interfaces we particularly look into when certifying? The main aspects of our certification program is looking at the coexisting protocol. So meaning the protocol between the CBSD and the SAS. The SAS is giving a spectrum grant to the CBSD so that CBSD is allowed to operate under certain condition in a certain spectrum area. And that protocol is of utmost importance, and that is what we certify and test under release 1. The second component is the interface towards the end user devices, and we specifically look into the power spectrum of that interface. What is currently not in scope is we don't look into the network equipment side, so we don't certify the evolved packet core. We don't certify at the moment the SAS, and we don't certify end user devices or do any testing for the LTE system itself, because the LTE testing and certification, that's basically done by 3GPP, and we don't need to replicate those testing. But I mentioned we particularly look into the power spectrum, because the SAS is giving a grant as part of the grant to the CBSD, is telling the CBSD what are the power limits of the transmission of the CBSD. And from our perspective, we need to ensure that those those power systems, the power levels are met. So that's why we particularly look into this interface to ensure that the power levels are met. And of course, we, as the Alliance, is focusing on LTE and other 3GPP systems. We don't look into non-LTE systems. This is the current scope. We will expand in future releases to particularly look into certification aspect for the SAS and potentially also end user devices and the evolved packet core. But this picture at the moment shows really the release 1 aspect. So what we do from a testing perspective, what is our test strategy? We actually have 2 components. The first one is functional testing. So it's basically really protocol conformance testing. Especially we look at the protocol between the CBSD and the SAS, and we have a dedicated test harness, a test tool, which is sending dedicated messages to the CBSD, and we analyze the responses of the CBSD and whether those responses of the CBSD is compliant with the protocol. So it's standard protocol conformance testing. Send messages, receive message back, and analyze the responses and validate that all the necessary components of the message or the fields of the message are correct. And we have a multitude of different test cases for that. The second aspect of the of the test strategy is performance testing. And this is particularly regarding understanding whether the CBSD is meeting the power constraints as provided by the SAS. So that is when we put a power spectrum analyzer to the CBSD and check the power, the dissipated power spectrum. This can be either radiated or conducted, whatever is appropriate and from the tester perspective. So we don't dictate whether it has to be radiated or conducted. Either or can work. From a test plan, we are building on the test plan which is coming from the Wind Forum, and the Wind Forum is particularly have a detailed test plan for all the release 1 features, which is about the coexisting features. Going forward, we are currently developing a CBS Alliance specific test plan, which is particularly looking into features which have been added by the CBS Alliance, which are not specific to the Wind Forum site. So CBS Alliance is continuously working on improving, particularly coexistence between devices, and particularly looking into simplifying the use of some of the network services use cases. Those requirements which are coming in, we are developing requirements for, and those are covered by the CBS Alliance specific test plan. We now look in more detail into the Wind Forum test plan. There are in total 55 test cases defined, and they're 100% focusing on the interaction between the SAS and the CBSD. You see the different groups of the message changes: registration, the grant, the heartbeat, the measurement, the relinquishment, the deregistration, and the security aspect of the protocol between the CBSD and the SAS. And there are a number of test cases defined for those. Some of them are applicable for the CBSD only. Some of them are applicable for the CBSD domain proxy, and some test cases are applicable for both of them. But in total, we have 55 test cases defined. If you undergo the testing as a CBSD or as a CBSD domain proxy pair, at the end, you are dealing with about 37 test cases. Not all of the test cases are mandatory. A few of them are actually conditional. So it depends on whether your particular CBSD or your particular CBSD domain proxies implement a certain feature. If they do, you will need to undergo specific test cases at that point. So you see, for example, condition C1 is dependent on whether you support multi-step registration messages. If you don't, there is no need to undergo the dedicated test case. But if you support multi-step registration, there is a dedicated test case for validating that your device is performing correctly as specified for multi-step registration. And there are other conditions listed here as well. So when undergoing certification, you basically would need to analyze whether your device meets a certain condition, and if they do, additional test cases apply. There are a few other test cases which are optional. They refer to purely optional features. So if you implement them, you execute those. Otherwise, there is no need for you to execute the test cases. But there's only a minimum set of those test cases. So in total, we have 8 of them: 5 which are relevant for CBSDs, and 5 which are relevant for CBSD domain proxies. So let's take a look at how you actually would go through the certification process. And it's a straightforward process. So once you feel ready, you have developed your CBSD, you have developed your CBSD domain proxy pair, and you feel you're ready to go. As a vendor, you would then submit a certification request. We have a dedicated web page you go to where you can start the process of requesting certification. The important aspect here is that as a vendor, you will need to be a CBS Alliance member. So certification is not available to non-members. So the first step, of course, in that regard is then when you become a CBS Alliance member. And if you aren't, then you have access to the website to request a certification. Once you have started the certification, the first thing you will need to do is you will pick an ATL, an authorized test lab, which is then able to perform all the necessary testing, and which will also be then most probably then the lab which is then obtaining the FCC identifier. So a crucial aspect of our certification process is the availability and the authorization of your device from the FCC. So you will need to have an FCC identifier for Part 96 in order to proceed with OnGo certification. After the ATL has performed all the necessary tests, and I've showed in the past slides, I've showed the necessary test cases and the list of test cases which need to be performed. Once this is complete, the ATL will create a test report, and that test report will be uploaded to our database. The test report as such at the moment for release 1 is basically the same test report which you also use as part of your FCC authorization. So there might be some few specific requirements from a CBS Alliance perspective. So we require, for example, that you specifically highlight the version information of your device, software version as well as hardware version. So these are dedicated aspects we require to be available in the test report, but we don't require additional testing. So the testing you have been doing for the FCC authorization will be sufficient to also undergo FCC or OnGo certification for release 1. So once all the information is available, the CBS Alliance Certification Board will take a look at the provided material and review the results. If all the results meet the necessary criteria, and the certification board will determine OnGo certification. If successful, then the vendor will be notified about the successful OnGo certification, and then the CBS Alliance can then publish the certification. Quick overview of the different certification types. Most vendors will start with initial certification. So meaning if it is the first certification you do for a dedicated product, initial certification is the way to go. It's very similar to what you have on the FCC side as authorization as an original equipment. And in all cases, it requires full testing with all test cases which are applicable for your device will require testing. Once you have initial certification and you do further changes to this, so your product undergoes regular life cycles, you do a software update, you do other changes to that, you may need to go through an engineering change order process, and that's an ECO. So that's applicable for all devices which have been already certified and to which you have done an update, which is something very similar to what you have on the FCC side as permissive changes class 2 and 3. It may require testing, it may require full testing. That is something to be determined because it's basically refers to what is your engineering change order, what is the update you have been doing. So if you update only a small piece of the equipment, so maybe you don't need to do full retesting. If you've done a full software update, which impacts the coexisting portion of your device, of the protocol you've been implementing, most probably you will need to do full retesting. And the third component is rebranding. And rebranding is a dedicated setup where as a vendor, you actually don't develop your own device, but you buy equipment from another device and resell it under your own brand. This is very similar to what FCC called change in identification. And this does not require testing. It's basically a paper documentation. So you basically need to prove that the vendor from which you are acquiring the equipment is allowing you to do so. And basically then and the vendor who is rebranding it needs to make a statement that you haven't done any changes to that equipment you are acquiring. So that at the end, it is already certified equipment which is being used, The only change is basically packaging and replacing the brand, going from one brand to the other brand. So that's the only allowed changes you're allowed to do in order to use the rebranding process. If you do this, it's pretty easy to undergo. It's paper documentation only with no additional retesting required. When it comes to documentation which is required to actually undergo certification, there's a few documents we require, and in most cases the ATL is going to provide that piece of information. So as mentioned, we particularly need to know the identifier of the product, so the product details, typically model name, model numbers, and particular version information. In version information, I mean the version of your software, which is undergoing certification and testing, and the hardware version. If you start using different version, if you update your version information, then most probably you will need to inform us, and you may need to undergo an engineering change order process. So that's why we are capturing this version information. We asked for a product description, a user manual. We asked for a license agreement to actually use to a license to use the tools for the database and so forth. And we required a verified FCC identifier. So meaning, in order to undergo the process for OnGo certification, you need to have your FCC identifier for authorization for Part 96 available. Then the ATL will upload the necessary test reports and log files, and a declaration of compliance form. I come to that at a later point, what that particular document is about. Once all the documents available, as mentioned, the certification board will review the reports and the document. We may need to go back to the vendor or to the ATL if there are additional questions. So if there is certain information missing from the test report, we are going to go back to the ATL and ask for inclusion and update of the test report to receive the additional information. But otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward process. The vendor and the ATL is uploading information, and it's reviewed from the certification board on the Alliance site. There are numbers of ATLs who are able to help vendors undergoing the OnGo certification process, and these are the ones authorized by the Alliance to do this. So in total, at the moment, we have 11 authorized test labs at different country locations as listed here. All ATLs are ISO 17025 accredited, and more test labs are coming online as we see interest. So we don't have a limitation of number of test labs. So we basically see as ATLs seeing as a value of being accredited and authorized by the CBS Alliance to do OnGo testing. We will add those to the list. I mentioned we have a dedicated declaration form, and this is particularly speaking to the fact that from a CBS Alliance perspective, we don't do LTE testing or 3GPP related testing. While CBS Alliance is about using LTE and other 3GPP technologies in the CBS spectrum, we ourselves don't do own testing for LTE or other 3GPP technologies. Rather testing our own, we basically ask vendors to state compliant with relevant 3GPP specifications, which are relevant for this band. So it's a paper declaration signed by the vendor, and it basically confirms that the device under test is compliant with specific 3GPP specifications, and those specifications are the relevant ones to be compliant with the CBS Alliance specifications. So this is particularly regarding TDD operation for band 48 and support for TDD configurations on the uplink downlink configuration. It's 1 and 2, and specific special subframe configuration 7. And we have dedicated network synchronization requirements, which need to be complied to as well. This is then stated here as well. So as mentioned, we don't verify this. We require vendors to sign that declaration form. Whereas release 1 is only about EU LTE interfaces, and this is what we certify. So OnGo certification of 5G and our coexistence will become only available in release 3. But under release 1, we are currently working on a mechanism to allow a dedicated 5G ready statement. So this is not a certification statement, it's just a statement of being ready for 5G. In order to achieve this, a vendor will need to sign a dedicated separate declaration of compliance statement, which will list 5G specific requirements. So very similar to the LTE statements, which I've shown here, but it will specifically add additional 5G related compliance statements, which will need to be signed and declared on. This is currently under development and will be available soon for vendors who are interested to, in addition to the OnGo Release 1 certification for LTE, are interested to also make a statement regarding 5G support. And as mentioned here, so full 5G certification and NR certification will become available as part of Release 3. So once certification has been achieved, results can be published on our website. This website is given here. It's an optional element, but so far I think all members have opted in to have their devices listed on our website. So we list vendor names, device name, the device type, so either CBSD or CBSD domain proxy, and we also list the certification date. So feel free to go on that list, and you're able to see all the already certified devices in there. As a benefit to our ecosystem, we also list end-user devices. As mentioned, we don't certify end-user devices. So at the moment, we list end-user devices which have achieved FCC authorization. It's the best effort on our side, so we might be missing some devices there. Also, in that regard, we are open for vendor input. So if vendors who are deploying end-user devices who have achieved FCC authorization for port 96 for the end-user device, they're open and welcome to contact us, and we are more than happy to add them to the list of FCC authorized end-user devices for band 48. And you see a screenshot of what we basically record. So we record the vendor name, the device name, the device type, the model number, the FCC identifier, and the authorization date there. So if you're interested to have your device listed there, reach out to myself or to CBS Alliance Administration to get your device listed. At the end, there's always a question: what is the fee? Is there any fee associated to certification? Yes, there is. There is a dedicated CBS Alliance certification fee, which is processed from the OnGo database administration. So if they use the OnGo database and upload your necessary data, there's also a dedicated tab for processing the fee and to download the invoice for this. So the CTIA as an OnGo database administrator, they will process that. Important note is the certification that the certification fee does not include testing fees, which are completely separate. And from a CBS Alliance perspective, we are not involved in this. This is something a vendor negotiate with the ATL. It's completely independent of CBS Alliance certification fee. The certification fee is listed down there. Initial certification request, the certification fee is $5,000 US. For an ECO request as well as for a rebranding request is $500. Now to have a quick look how many certifications we have processed and how successful we have been in the past with OnGo certification. So this graph basically shows the time of the number of certifications, how they have been developed over the time. So at the moment, we basically see a constant, continuous linear growth of the CBSD OnGo certification ecosystem. We are standing at the moment at 37 individual certified OnGo CBSDs. If you look into a bit more detail, what are the device categories we have already certified? About 49%, about half of the certified devices are category B devices. 38% of our certified CBSD domain proxies are Cat A, and we have about 13% certified CPEs. It's always a question is how long does it take? And for that, I took some analysis and see from the start of achieving OnGo FCC authorization, how long does it take for vendors to actually submit the initial certification for OnGo? And that's basically what is shown here on the blue side. And actually, you see that most of vendors submit their OnGo certification request actually prior receiving FCC authorization. So they do it basically at the same time when they start the FCC authorization process. They also right away start the OnGo certification request. But once they achieve FCC authorization, it's pretty quick to actually go through the OnGo certification. So actually 44% of vendors have been able to receive OnGo certification within a month after receiving FCC authorization. And for us, it's a gating criteria. As mentioned, we require FCC authorization before we can actually process OnGo certification. But once that is achieved, it's pretty fast. So within less than a month, most of the OnGo certifications can be completed now on our end. So it's a very streamlined, simplified process for us to undergo once FCC authorization has been achieved. If you'd like to get an understanding of how the end-user device side looks like, I have here a graph of the FCC authorizations for end-user devices. You see as well as a linear growth, pretty stable. We are standing at the moment at 82 unique and certified authorized end-user devices. It's a pretty healthy ecosystem. You see, particularly in the first half of the year, really constant growth of the ecosystem. Standing at the moment at 82. So to conclude, I'd like to give you a quick outlook to where we are going. So as mentioned, we are at the moment certifying release 2 devices. For release 2, we are currently working heavily on within the test and certification workgroup within CBS Alliance. We are particularly looking into the updated CBS Alliance specific coexistence requirements. So dedicated requirements which are CBS Alliance specific. We have the CBS Alliance as part of release 2 have added a dedicated new component into the architecture, which is the Coexistence Manager. It's a component which is supporting the coexistence between CBSD devices implementing LTE interfaces. And we are also expanding the scope into that device. So there will be a certification program which specifically will address CXM components. We are looking into adding declaration statements for some of the CBS Alliance network service use cases like neutral host, private network, public network, and so forth. So particularly try to address the desire of our members to have dedicated statement that a device is ready to support, for example, neutral host or to support private LTE. So that we are going to look into as well and start preparing declaration statement for those use cases. The plan to start is to have release 2 ready by the end of the year so that we can start certifying beginning of 2021. Release 3 certification is on the horizon for us as well. As mentioned, that will include 5G and our coexistence requirements, and that will be the first time we will be able to fully certify for 5G and R as well. There is no timeline yet, but it will be available sometime in 2021. So our current focus is on release 2, and as soon as that is ready and out, we will shift our attention on release 3 certification and release 4 as it comes along. I think that all what I have in mind to bring to your attention. I think there's a lot of material. I'm happy to answer any question as you might have.
Thank you, Jörg. Very good. We do have a few questions here. So the first question I'll read off to you is, does the CPRS Alliance certification fee apply to end user device registrations?
So as mentioned, so the certification fee what we have is covering OnGo certification. It does not include anything what the ATL is doing, so with respect to testing, and it does not include all the necessary processing of the FCC. So FCC authorization fees are not included as well. On top of that, at the moment, as part of a release 1, OnGo does not extend to end user devices. So at the moment, the OnGo certification is not covering end user devices. It's only covering CBSD and CBSD domain proxies. So meaning end user device side at the moment, the only thing what you do is working with the FCC to achieve FCC authorization, and all the fees which are listed here are not covering that part.
Very good. Thanks, Jörg. Our next question that we have, I've noticed that some overseas suppliers seem to think that if they get FCC Part 96 approval, they're good to go for CBRS. They don't realize they also need OnGo certification.
So OnGo certification, in order to operate in the CBS band, so band 48, in order to operate in that band, you only need to have FCC authorization for doing so. You need to go to the FCC or to the ATL and then achieve FCC authorization for Part 96. Once you achieve authorization from the FCC, you can operate in the band. OnGo certification in that regard is an optional element which we offer for LTE and in the future for other 3GPP technologies. And in order, if you undergo OnGo certification, you basically claim that you're compliant with additional CBS Alliance specific requirements. So it's basically you demonstrate that you're part of the CBS Alliance ecosystem. For operation in the band 48, this is not required. It's basically it's additional benefit you get if you undergo OnGo to demonstrate that you comply with additional requirements, you comply with additional coexistence requirements, and you're then as part of that, you're part of the CBS Alliance ecosystem.
Very good. Thanks, Jörg. Third question that we've got: will the CPRS Coexistence technical specifications apply to CPE CBSDs?
They do already. So I actually show this in the numbers. So I actually have already CPE CBSDs being certified under OnGo. So the same requirements, the same coexistence requirements apply to them as they apply for Cat A and Cat B devices. So CPE CBSDs need to get a grant from the SAS, and that is tested under OnGo as well as it is for Cat A and Cat B devices.
Very good. Are there any other questions from the floor? Good questions coming in. Well, very good. Well, I think we've covered the material well, Jörg. Thank you very much for the webinar today. If you do have further questions, please don't hesitate to contact Jörg as the program manager for the certification program. He's very happy to work with you and help guide you through the process and just make sure that it's a successful venture for you as members. With that, we will close down the webinar, but I did want to let you know that the recording of the webinar, the slides, and the questions that were asked will be available for download off of the through Causeway. So this is a resource that will be available to you, to your colleagues in the through Causeway, so you can share it with other members of your company. With that, I will say good afternoon. I wish you all good health. Please stay well, and look forward to chatting again in the near future. Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.